Movie opens with Katherine Goebel beginning her first day inside NASA's Space Task Group, where Executive Vivian Mitchell escorts her through the building and lays out the department's rigid expectations. Women must wear skirts, maintain a modest appearance, and avoid jewelry beyond a simple strand of pearls. Katherine will serve as a human computer under Division Director Al Harrison, researching and verifying the calculations behind NASA's rocket launches. Mitchell also gives her one final warning: never speak to Harrison unless he addresses her first. Mitchell reveals that Katherine is the latest in a long line of computers assigned to the division, several of whom failed to keep up. If Harrison decides she cannot handle the workload, she could be sent back within days. Handing over her badge, Mitchell reminds Katherine that no black woman has ever worked inside the Space Task Group and warns her not to embarrass West Computing. The moment Katherine enters the office, every conversation seems to stop. Before she can settle in, an engineer places a trash can on her belongings and complains that it has not been emptied since yesterday. Having mistaken her for the cleaner, he walks off before she can correct him. Katherine quietly moves the bin aside and introduces herself to Ruth, the only other woman in the room, explaining that she is Harrison's new computer. Ruth points her toward an empty desk at the back and warns her not to expect a warm welcome. Her safest option is to keep her head down and focus on the work, though that becomes difficult when half the office continues staring at her. Harrison soon storms out of his office and confronts lead engineer Paul Stafford over the capsule's heat shield, which keeps shedding shingles during testing. Paul explains that they are still working with a prototype whose protective covering is only a fraction of its final size. Harrison jokingly asks whether they should throw away their million-dollar fan before reminding him that if the shield fails, the astronaut riding inside the rocket will have no chance of surviving. He orders Paul to solve the problem, then turns his attention to the newest computer. Ruth introduces Katherine, and Harrison immediately tests whether she belongs there. He asks if she understands analytic geometry, hands her a stack of calculations, and tells her to determine the Freinet frame. Katherine identifies the required method without hesitation, catching him slightly off guard.
I prefer it over Euclidean coordinates.
Hiding his surprise, Harrison orders her to deliver the completed work before the end of the day and assigns her to verify every calculation produced on the floor, including Paul's. Paul objects, insisting that his figures do not require checking. But Harrison reminds him that if his work were flawless, pieces of the spacecraft would not still be falling off. With the Mercury 7 arriving soon, they are preparing to send humans into space for the first time, meaning every number in that room could decide whether an astronaut lives or dies and whether NASA succeeds or humiliates itself. Harrison asks whether anyone still has a problem with having their work reviewed. This time, the office stays silent. Paul may stop arguing, but he has no intention of helping Katherine. Sitting directly in front of her, he uses a thick marker to black out several classified figures before dropping the files onto her desk and declaring that his calculations are already perfect. Katherine agrees to check them, only to discover that the information she needs has been hidden beneath the ink. When she points out that she cannot verify incomplete data, Paul dismisses her concern. The missing figures are classified, and her security clearance is not high enough to see them. The impossible workload is soon matched by an even more humiliating obstacle. When Katherine asks Ruth where the ladies' room is, Ruth admits she has no idea because the building has no restroom for black women. The only one Katherine is permitted to use is nearly half a mile away in the West Computing Division, forcing her to sprint across the NASA complex just to relieve herself. Her absence does not go unnoticed. Harrison spots the empty desk and demands to know where his new computer has gone. Ruth assumes she is taking a break, which only irritates him because the Space Task Group barely takes any breaks. By the time Katherine returns breathless from the run, another stack of urgent files is already waiting for her. Katherine soon pours herself coffee, and the room immediately falls silent. Understanding her co-worker's discomfort, she says nothing and quietly returns to her desk, refusing to give anyone a reason to send her away. Katherine works long after the office empties. Late that evening, she delivers the completed calculations to Harrison, only for him to tell her to place them in the trash can beside his desk. Seeing her confusion, he explains that he is not discarding her work. Information changes so quickly that yesterday's answers can become useless overnight. Formalities do not matter to him. His only concern is solving problems no one has ever solved before, because without those answers, NASA will never reach space.
What I'm asking you to do, what I'm asking everyone in that room, all my geniuses, is to look beyond the numbers for answers to questions we don't even know to ask. Math that doesn't yet exist. Because without it, we're not going anywhere. Flying into space, we're not circling the Earth, and we're certainly not touching the moon. And in my mind, I'm already there. Are you?
Yes, sir.
Good. Because I don't need another smart girl with an adding machine.
Can I go, sir?
Go. Yeah, go. Yeah, go.
After leaving the building, Katherine finds her best friends, Dorothy and Mary, waiting outside. During the drive home, Dorothy vents about spending more than a decade arriving early, managing the West Computing Division, and performing every responsibility of a supervisor without receiving the title or the pay. She is happy that opportunities are opening for her friends, but she cannot ignore the feeling that NASA is leaving her behind. Katherine admits that the space task group is far more difficult than she imagined, and jokes that she may be back in West Computing before long. Dorothy rejects the idea, reminding her that she is one of NASA's finest mathematicians. When Dorothy catches Mary resting her feet on the dashboard, she scolds her, prompting both women to tease Dorothy for already behaving like a supervisor. Their laughter finally breaks the tension. When Dorothy drops Katherine off, her mother jokes that she nearly called the National Guard because she hadn't arrived home yet. Katherine explains her transfer and admits that the opportunity is harder than expected, but her mother reminds her that she has overcome far worse. Inside, Katherine finds her 3 daughters arguing over their sleeping arrangement. Joylette, the oldest, has a bed to herself, while the younger 2 share. Katherine ends the dispute by announcing that anyone who takes Joylette's bed will also inherit every one of her chores. The younger girls immediately retreat. As Katherine tucks them in, the noise fades, and she quietly admits how much she still misses their father, who died from cancer.
Yes, he's with all the angels.
And he's watching over us.
Every minute, okay? That's why we have to be strong, all right?
Yes, Mama.
One daughter then asks whether the Russians are preparing for war now because they had to perform safety drills in school. Katherine admits that no one knows what the Russians intend, but promises to do everything in her power to help America's astronauts succeed. The following Sunday, their church proudly recognizes the women helping build America's space program and welcomes Colonel Jim Johnson, who has returned to Hampton to establish a National Guard unit. At the gathering afterward, Mary argues with her husband Levi over her dream of becoming an engineer. Her supervisor believes she has the talent, but Levi fears NASA will never give a black woman a fair opportunity and believes she is only setting herself up for disappointment. As the argument grows heated, Mary walks away and joins Katherine and Dorothy. Spotting Jim nearby, Mary insists on introducing him despite Katherine's reluctance. The moment he approaches, Dorothy and Mary make it clear that they are both unavailable before presenting Katherine as a widowed mother of 3. Satisfied with their matchmaking, they abandon her to handle the rest. Jim offers to help carry food for Katherine's daughters, and the conversation begins pleasantly until she explains that she calculates the mathematics behind NASA's launches and landings. Surprised that women are trusted with such demanding work, Jim unintentionally insults her. Katherine immediately reminds him that she was the first black woman admitted to graduate school at West Virginia University, routinely solves thousands of equations, and works alongside nearly 20 other black women helping power America's space program.
On any given day, I analyze the manometer levels for air displacement, friction, and velocity, and compute over 10,000 calculations by cosine, square root, and lately analytic geometry. There are 20 bright, highly capable Negro women in the West Computing Group, and we're proud to be doing our part for the country. So yes, they let women do some things at NASA, Mr. Johnson. And it's not because we wear skirts, it's because we wear glasses. Have a good day.
Jim meant no harm, but the damage is done, leaving their first meeting painfully awkward. Soon afterward, the Mercury 7 arrive for training. As employees line up to greet them, the women from West Computing are left standing apart. John Glenn notices, walks over, and shakes each of their hands. When Katherine explains that they calculate rocket trajectories, Glenn acknowledges that the astronauts cannot accomplish anything without people like them before he is called away. Back inside the space task group, Katherine discovers a separate coffee pot labeled for black employees. When she tries to pour herself a cup, she finds it empty. Another quiet reminder that her co-workers still see her as an outsider. Paul soon drops a new stack of calculations onto her desk and explains that Harrison wants her to verify the launch and landing figures for an upcoming Redstone test. Once again, large sections have been blacked out. When Katherine argues that she cannot verify numbers she is forbidden to see, Paul claims that he and 2 other engineers have already checked everything and that her review is essentially a dummy check. After he leaves, Katherine lifts the pages toward the light and discovers that the hidden equations are still faintly visible beneath the marker. Looking across the office at the large chalkboard, she realizes that the rest of the missing information has been sitting in plain sight. While Harrison is occupied elsewhere, she reconstructs the calculations herself. At the same time, Dorothy notices engineers struggling to move an enormous machine into the technology wing after removing part of the doorway. Mitchell explains that it is IBM's newest mainframe, capable of completing calculations in a fraction of the time required by human computers. Dorothy immediately understands what that could mean for her entire department. While Dorothy considers the threat, Katherine finishes the equation on the chalkboard and races across the complex for another restroom trip. Harrison enters moments later, sees the completed solution, and demands to know who solved it. Ruth admits that Katherine did. The instant Katherine returns, Harrison surrounds her with questions.
Half the data is redacted.
Well, what's there tells a story if you read between the lines. The distance from launch to orbit, we know. Redstone mass, we know. Mercury capsule weight, we know. And the speeds are there.
You did the math.
Yes, sir.
And how do you know about the Atlas rocket? That's not math. That data's not here, like you said. It's classified.
Katherine admits that she held the papers against the light and read the name of the rocket beneath the ink. Harrison tries it himself, then jokingly asks whether she is a Russian spy. Ruth confirms that she is not Russian, prompting Harrison to order Paul to stop hiding information she needs. Paul objects, but Harrison refuses to let bureaucracy interfere with progress. During lunch, Mitchell informs Mary that she is not qualified for NASA's engineering program. Mary points out that she already holds degrees in mathematics and physical science, just like many of NASA's engineers, but Mitchell explains that the requirements have changed. She now needs advanced extension courses offered only by a university in Virginia. At Dorothy's home, Mary weighs her options. Hampton offers the course she needs, but the school is reserved for only white students. As Mary begins another angry complaint, Dorothy tells her to petition the court, fight for what she wants, or stop yapping about it. She returns with a jar of liquor and declares that they are done discussing work problems for the night. For a few hours, the women drink, laugh, and forget the walls waiting outside. Dorothy soon takes her sons to the library and searches the white section for advanced programming books, knowing West Computing must learn the IBM before it replaces them. A guard catches her and escorts the family out, but on the ride home, Dorothy tells her sons that something is not right, simply because society accepts it. She then reveals the Fortran book she secretly stole and begins studying. At her son's birthday party, Jim arrives with flowers and apologizes for underestimating Katherine.
I've been away for a long time, and imagine I'm just out of practice. I was hoping you'd allow me to start over. See, the thing is, I have an interest in getting to know you better. You one tough customer, huh?
Their relationship begins to recover, but breaking news interrupts them. The Soviet Union has sent the first human into orbit. The achievement sends shockwaves through NASA. Harrison refuses to accept that the Soviets are simply better and pushes the entire space task group into relentless overtime.
We're in the fight of our lives, people. We're not on some epic joyride. I just saw 7 faces who aren't sure that we can get there. This is our problem. And so as of right now, there's only 2 things you need to know going forward. One is staying here, working late, that's going to be a fact of life. And 2, don't expect your paychecks to reflect the extra time it's going to take to catch up and pass those bastards. For those of you who can't work that way, I understand, and thank you for what you've done. For everyone else, I suggest you call your wives, tell them how it's going to be. Let's start with mine.
As tests keep failing, Paul buries Katherine beneath new files, while Mary petitions the court to attend the all-white school offering her required courses. Dorothy gathers the women of West Computing and explains the danger approaching them. The IBM can process more than 24,000 equations per second and will eventually take their jobs. NASA may not know how to operate it yet, but that advantage will not last. Their only chance is to become the people who know how to control the machine before the machine replaces them. Elsewhere, Mary tells Mr. Zelinsky that she has taken the first legal step toward becoming an engineer, earning applause. At the same time, Dorothy sneaks into the technology wing, discovers why the IBM is not functioning, and fixes it. While Dorothy proves that the future still needs her, Harrison notices that Katherine has vanished from her desk again. Unknown to him, she is sprinting half a mile through pouring rain in high heels just to reach the nearest restroom she is allowed to use. When Katherine returns soaked and exhausted, Harrison accuses her of disappearing every day and wasting valuable time. Years of silent humiliation finally break through. Katherine explains that there is no restroom for black women anywhere in the building, forcing her to spend nearly an hour crossing the complex whenever she needs one. She is also expected to work beside people who refuse to share a coffee pot with her, leaving her to drink from a separate container no one bothers to fill.
Picture that, Mr. Harrison. my uniform, skirt below my knees, my heels, and a simple string of pearls. Well, I don't own pearls. Lord knows you don't pay colors enough to afford pearls. And I work like a dog day and night, living off of coffee from a pot none of you want to touch. So, excuse me if I have to go to the restroom a few times a day.
By the time she finishes, the entire room is silent and Harrison is visibly ashamed. The next day, he tears the colored ladies' room sign from the wall and declares that everyone at NASA will use whichever restroom is closest because
Here at NASA, we all pee the same color.
he also removes the separate coffee pot, eliminating the divisions inside his department that had been quietly sabotaging Katherine's work. After the strain leaves Katherine ill, Jim visits with homemade soup and earns the trust of her daughters. NASA soon scores its first major victory when Alan Shepard launches aboard Freedom 7. Katherine, Dorothy, Mary, and their families watch the successful flight before President Kennedy declares that space should be governed by freedom and peace, rather than a hostile flag. The celebration inside NASA is brief. Paul jokes that Kennedy has secured their jobs before announcing the next stages of the program. Gus Grissom will attempt another suborbital flight, and John Glenn will follow as the first American to attempt a full orbit aboard the Atlas. Getting him into space is only half the challenge. They must also bring him safely back to Earth. Harrison advises everyone to eat dinner with their families and return to work. Katherine uses the break to spend time with Jim, who admits that his feelings for her are growing stronger, and they finally share a kiss. Elsewhere, Levi watches a report about a Freedom Rider bus being bombed outside Anniston, Alabama. Mary worries that their children should not see it, but Levi insists they must understand the world around them. The violence strengthens Mary's resolve. She enters court to petition for permission to attend night classes at Hampton High School. The judge reminds her that Hampton is a white school and Virginia remains segregated. But Mary appeals directly to his pride. She lists the barriers he was the first in his family to break and explains that she cannot become a NASA engineer without these classes. Of all the cases he will hear that day, she asks, which one could make his name part of history?
I plan on being an engineer at NASA, but I can't do that without taking them classes at that all-white high school, and I can't change the color of my skin. So I have no choice but to be the first. Your Honor, out of all the cases you're gonna hear today, which one is gonna matter 100 years from now? Which one is gonna make you the first?
Amused and persuaded, the judge grants her permission to attend night classes. While Mary earns the right to move forward, Katherine completes Gus Grissom's launch and landing projections. With preparations accelerating, she asks Harrison for permission to begin calculating John Glenn's orbital trajectory. Paul tries to intercept her, but Katherine steps around him and speaks directly to Harrison. He warns that this assignment will be different. She will not simply insert known values into established formulas. She will have to create numbers that do not yet exist. Paul argues that the task is beyond her, but Katherine makes it clear that she understands the difficulty.
It's like shooting a sawed-off shotgun from 1,000 feet and getting that one BB through a hole so tiny you can't even see it. I'm an excellent shot, sir.
Harrison asks how accurate her calculations have been for Grissom's mission. Forced to answer honestly, Paul admits that she has been spot on. Harrison gives Katherine permission to proceed, though every result must still pass through Paul. Paul then hands her the updated data, ordering her to remove her name as an author, and reminds her that computers do not author reports. Grissom's rocket eventually launches, but the capsule lands far from its target and begins sinking into the ocean. He is rescued, but the failure leaves Harrison facing a government panel demanding answers. They accuse him of burning through taxpayer money and question how he can guarantee Glenn's safety during a full orbit when NASA cannot land a suborbital capsule correctly. Harrison refuses to promise that exploration can ever be risk-free. Discovery, he argues, is pursued because humanity's survival depends on moving forward, and progress will always carry danger. Back at NASA, Paul explains that Grissom's rocket climbed upward, but never gained enough horizontal speed to enter orbit. The Atlas can generate that velocity, but this creates a more dangerous problem. NASA knows how to send Glenn around the Earth. What it still does not know is how to bring him home. After the meeting, Katherine asks to attend the classified briefings. She explains that the mission data changes constantly, and her calculations cannot remain accurate unless she receives the updated readings as soon as they are produced. Paul rejects the request and threatens to replace her if she cannot calculate, with whatever incomplete information she is given. While Katherine remains trapped outside the room where decisions are made, Dorothy returns to the technology wing and begins testing the IBM. Several technicians confront her, But their outrage disappears when the machine finally starts producing numbers. Realizing that Dorothy has succeeded where the department failed, one officer asks for her name. Meanwhile, Katherine submits her first projections for Glenn's launch, only for Paul to announce that the engineers have changed the data again and order her to restart everything. She again asks to attend the briefing so she can receive the Atlas figures directly, but Paul refuses. With Harrison watching, Katherine returns to her desk and recalculates from scratch. When she completes the report, Katherine lists herself as an author. Paul removes her name and orders her to redo the cover because human computers do not author reports. Their argument draws Harrison over, and Katherine explains that the data changes every week while Glenn's launch is only weeks away. NASA still lacks final numbers, yet she is expected to produce accurate projections without being allowed into the meetings where those numbers are created. Harrison asks Paul why she cannot attend. Paul admits that the only obstacle is protocol, because women have never been permitted inside.
Pentagon briefings are not for civilians. It requires the highest clearance.
I feel like I'm the best person to present my
You're not gonna
calculations.
let this go, are you?
No, I am not.
And she is a woman. There is no protocol for a woman
Okay,
attending
I
these
get
meetings.
that part, Paul. But within these walls, who makes the rules?
You, sir, you are the boss. You just have to act like one, sir.
You keep quiet.
Thank you.
For the first time, Katherine enters a room filled with senior engineers and military officials, all staring in disbelief. The discussion turns to orbital speed and the capsule's landing zone, exposing gaps in Paul's preparation. Katherine answers the questions from memory, and when the officials demand proof, she is handed a piece of chalk. She immediately covers the blackboard with equations and calculates where Glenn's capsule should return to Earth. Her final prediction impresses the room and gives NASA the confidence to move forward. As launch day approaches, IBM's mainframe becomes responsible for millions of calculations that human computers can no longer complete quickly enough. Because almost no one understands the system, Dorothy is offered a temporary transfer to the programming division. She refuses, unless every woman she has trained is transferred with her. The machine is too complex for one person, and her team is more than capable of doing the work. Management eventually gives in. For the first time, the women of the West Area Computing Group leave the damp basement that has confined them for years and walk together into the technology wing. Dorothy has not merely protected their jobs, she has positioned them to control the machine that was supposed to replace them. Back in the Space Task Group, Harrison reminds Paul that his real job is not proving he is the smartest person in the room, but recognizing the genius around him. Paul leaves, pausing to watch Katherine finish her calculations with a new measure of respect. At home, Mary warns Levi that her night class ends at 9, and she does not know when she will return. Instead of discouraging her, Levi gives her a clutch pencil and tells her she will make a fine engineer. Mary heads to Hampton, arriving late to shocked stares from the white students and their teacher. When the instructor warns that the course was not designed for women, Mary replies that teaching a woman is probably no different from teaching a man. Since the room has no colored section, she calmly chooses a seat and begins class. Katherine soon encounters the mission's greatest mathematical obstacle. NASA can calculate the launch trajectory and predict the landing zone, but no established numerical method exists for moving the capsule from an elliptical orbit into the parabolic path required for re-entry. Without that transition, Glenn could remain trapped circling Earth. After exhausting every modern approach, Katherine realizes that the answer may lie in one of mathematics' oldest methods. She races back to West Computing and searches until she finds an old reference book containing Euler's method. Applying the forgotten technique to the mission data, she discovers that it produces exactly the values NASA has been missing. An equation developed centuries earlier has solved the problem blocking America's orbital mission. Katherine leaves work early and returns home to find an unexpected feast. Believing she has forgotten someone's birthday, she begins questioning the family until Jim steps forward and reveals that he arranged everything. Only then does she notice the ring box on the table. Holding a treasured family heirloom, Jim explains that he called his mother on the day he met Katherine and told her he had found the woman he wanted to marry. Before he can finish, Katherine becomes overwhelmed and accepts, surrounded by the children and family who have already welcomed him into their lives. After 5 successful unmanned tests, NASA declares the IBM ready for full operation. Harrison privately explains the consequences to Katherine. The machine now calculates faster than any human, and the launch center intends to handle most of the computational work itself. Human computers are becoming obsolete. Despite everything Katherine has contributed, Harrison has no authority to keep her in the space task group. With no other option, she returns to her former assignment while he watches one of his most gifted employees leave the room where she belongs. Harrison arranges for human resources to give Katherine a pearl necklace, selected by his wife, a quiet acknowledgement of everything she accomplished in a department that never expected her to succeed. Her wedding day soon arrives, with Dorothy and Mary beside her as she begins a new chapter with Jim and her daughters. After 3 years and 2 months of preparation, John Glenn's launch day finally arrives. Only hours before liftoff, Harrison discovers that the IBM's latest landing coordinates do not match the previous day's calculations. When he informs Glenn, the astronaut admits that he no longer feels fully in control. Rather than trust the machine alone, Glenn makes one demand. Katherine must personally verify the figures before he will enter the rocket.
I mean, if she says they're good, I'm ready to go.
Harrison immediately sends employees racing toward West Computing with the latest data. They follow the same route Katherine has been forced to run countless times in high heels. But now, an astronaut's survival depends on how quickly those numbers reach her. The moment the files arrive, Katherine begins calculating. Outside, thousands of spectators gather while the launch crew waits for final clearance. Inside, she works through page after page, checking every variable and carrying every decimal until she confirms the correct landing coordinates. Without stopping to celebrate, Katherine grabs the results and races toward mission control. Even now, prejudice blocks her path. Sam is allowed through the doors, carrying the updated calculations, but Katherine is shut outside, despite being the person who produced them. She stands there dejected until Harrison pushes through, flashes his badge, and waves her into the control room himself. Standing before the mission team, Harrison announces Katherine's landing coordinates and points out that she carried the calculations several decimal places beyond the original landing position, making it clear that he trusts her work completely. Hearing her confirmation, Glenn finally agrees to fly. The countdown resumes and the rocket erupts from the launch pad. Mission Control celebrates as the capsule successfully enters orbit, but Katherine refuses to relax. Reaching space is only half the mission. Glenn must still survive the journey home. For the next 10 hours, Katherine barely leaves her position, following every stage of the flight and waiting for the moment her re-entry calculations are tested. When the capsule finally splashes down exactly where she predicted, the tension she has carried for years finally breaks. The control room explodes in celebration. While everyone congratulates one another, Katherine quietly turns to leave. Before she can disappear, Harrison calls her back and acknowledges that her ability was essential to the mission's success.
So, you think we can get to the moon?
We're already there, sir.
As a special exception, Katherine is allowed to remain with the launch team. The arrival of IBM will not end her career after all. Dorothy's leadership is finally recognized when she becomes NASA's first Black department supervisor. Mary completes the education she fought so hard to receive and becomes America's first Black female aerospace engineer. Over time, Katherine earns the respect of the colleagues who once refused to acknowledge her. Katherine continues using her extraordinary mathematical talent on the Apollo 11 moon landing, and later, the Space Shuttle program. NASA eventually names a computing facility, the Katherine Johnson Building, in her honor, and at 97 years old, she receives the Presidential Medal of Freedom. The woman once mistaken for a cleaner leaves behind calculations that carried astronauts beyond Earth, opened doors for generations of women after her, and ensured that the people she loved could look toward the stars knowing she had helped bring them safely home.